Many thanks indeed for joining us on AM Live. It is the 21st of August 2018 and we wish our Muslim brothers a good Eid. Of course, we shall also be focusing on what is happening in Saudi Arabia in our international stories as well as far as this event is concerned. We have a lot lined up for you today on People and Politics, where we look and drill deeper as far as politics in the country is concerned, looking at the shenanigans and what is happening and taking a trajectory of where our politics is shaping up to as well. That will be much later on today's People and Politics, which is up next. But as always, before we drill deeper, let's look at the highlights. We shall see what is on the front pages of our dailies much later in the course of the program. Prisoners at industrial area remand alleged torture and murder of inmates. Police disperse protesters demanding lawmakers release in Uganda. And UN staff human rights chief paid tribute to Kofi Annan. Hello, good morning. I'm Debarl Inea. 5 people are nursing gunshot injuries after chaos erupted during the burial of Douglas Wakachi, the driver of Likuyani MP Enoch Kibunguchi in Kiminini, Trans Nzoia County. According to some mourners, trouble started when the county executive in charge of sports in Kakamega County arrived. He was not welcome. NTV's Sharon Baranga starts us off.
The chaotic scenes in Mukuyu village, Trans Nzoia County, at a funeral service of Douglas Wakacha, who was the driver to Likuyani MP Enoch Kibunguchi. The violence was triggered by the arrival of County Executive in charge of sports from Kakamega, Robert Mahanu. His presence did not go down well with some mourners who wanted to eject him from the funeral service. They descended upon him with kicks and blows.
Risasi ambayo ilikuwa inataka kumpata mheshimiwa Mlipuko, mheshimiwa MC Mlipuko, hiyo risasi ilikuwa inamlenga mheshimiwa Wetangula.
Police officers fired in the air to try to disperse the angry crowd. 5 people were hit by stray bullets. 2 of those were bodyguards to MPs Esili Simiu and Enoch Kibunguchi. A third was Bernard Wanjala, member of County Assembly of Kapomboi, who is nursing gunshot wounds at Mount Elgon Hospital in Kitale.
Katika hali kama hii, polisi wako trained kupiga risasi kwa hewa. Jambo la pili, polisi wakija mahali kama hapa kwenye hakuna fujo, hawawezi kukubaliwa kisheria kuja na live bullets. Wanatembea na rubber bullets zenye haziwezi kuumiza mtu. Today we stand here to condemn this violence against innocent people.
Kibunguchi and Wetangula want the Inspector General to investigate the chaos and bring to book police who were allegedly shooting aimlessly at the burial. Eventually, calm was restored and Douglas Wakacha, who was killed last week at Soi Trading Center in Kakamega, was laid to rest. Sharon Baranga, NTV.
Now, inmates in the capital offences section of the Nairobi Remand and Allocation Prison are on a hunger strike to protest brutality of prison orders. The inmates singled out one officer who they said is particularly fond of using excessive force that has led to the death of 7 inmates. The management of the prison has denied the claim, saying the inmates are lying to frustrate the efforts of the guards to maintain law and order in the facility. NTV's Charity Mwangi tells us more.
A video sent to NTV from inside the industrial area remand and allocation prison shows a gathering of inmates for a common cause. Pictures closely followed that show their defiance. Their morning ration of porridge remained untouched.
So what we decided today is we want to demonstrate no lunch, no meals, no going to court until we want the commissioner himself, Osugo, to come.
The institution is calm and the business is as usual.
Their reason for this was readily shared by one of them, who claimed in a phone interview that in the last 2 weeks, 7 inmates have died at the hands of Superintendent Wilson Tonui, who is on administrative detail. Key among his duties include conducting random searches for contraband that, according to the officer in charge Samuel Ruto, is the reason for all the complaints.
For the night searches, haijakubaliwa mahali popote, because apparently when you come open the cells at night to kitoroka, what will you tell the askari zuko juu? When you come for these night searches, unapiga watu, unaumiza watu.
If we realize there's a particular thing which is against our rules and regulations happening in a particular place, would you just say it's because it is dead in the night, you not arrest that situation?
Ruto, however, acknowledged the existence of a pending case regarding the death of John Kibowen, a high-profile remandee who was facing the charge of impersonating the Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet. His explanation, however, seemed scanty as compared to the details shared by our contact.
When the body was taken at the city mortuary morgue for postmortem, it was said that alikufia kundani, he was sick. Then later on, the body was transferred at Chiromo mortuary for postmortem, and it was shown that the guy alipigwa.
He felt while queuing for food. Tanui, it was on a weekend. Tanui was not around. The officer you're talking about was not in. He was not on duty. Where could he have butchered him to that extent, yet he was not within the institution?
As for the other 6 deaths highlighted by the inmates, the officer in charge says that they are of remandees from other prisons outside Nairobi who had been transferred to facilitate treatment at the Kenyatta National Hospital.
Received prisoners were sick in this institution by way of transfer to this institution, by way of them being admitted at Kenyatta National Hospital. That is where they have been referred to for further management and treatment. And many of these cases that we receive are terminally ill patients.
The inmates also claimed they had skipped their court cases today and will continue to do so until the offending officer is transferred from the prison. The management, faulting their claims, said that over 184 inmates were taken to court today. A spot check of the situation in the Milimani law courts reveals some truth to the events being seemingly suppressed at the industrial area remand prison. None of the remandees from the capital offences section was in court today. The officers here at the Nairobi Remand and Allocation Prison now say that the delay in the court system could be a contributing factor for the unrest witnessed here, as inmates who've stayed too long are causing disturbances with the hope of continuing with their criminal activity. Charity Mwangi, NTV.
Now, Senate Public Accounts and Investment Committee Chairperson Moses Kajwang has defended his committee against allegations that members sought bribes to alter the Ruaraka Landcam report in favor of businessman Francis Mburu. Kajwang accuses Mburu and other people mentioned in the report of maligning the committee's name with claims of asking for 100 million shillings bribe and wants relevant investigative bodies to investigate it or to investigate his members.
It's not surprising that Francis Mburu has chosen to distract attention from his alleged criminal acts. Alongside his partners in crime, they have attempted all tricks to frustrate our inquiry and to suppress the truth. We have caught their hands in the cookie jar. We shall not be intimidated to silence by suspected thieves. Corruption fights back, but we are ready to fight to the end. We, therefore, request the Speaker of Senate to convene the Powers and Privileges Committee and to summon Francis Mburu and his sidekicks to substantiate the allegations of impropriety. We recommend that action be taken against any senator who may have breached parliamentary privilege. Similarly, firm action should be taken against Francis Mburu if these allegations are unsubstantiated and are found to be in contempt of Parliament.
Now, more than 120 judges and magistrates gathering in Mombasa for the annual colloquium have been challenged to maintain judicial independence and fidelity to the law in execution of their responsibilities visiting South African Chief Justice Mongoen Thomas Resang Mondoeng told the gathering to uphold integrity and accountability. Chief Justice David Maraga, on his part, called for diligence, and as Ken Mijungu reports, issues of budget cuts once again featured in the discussions.
Do that which is just. That's why we are described as Honorable Justice. Some of us are described as Chief Justice. Chief Justice. It means you must administer justice chiefly. Corrupt yourself, no matter the consequences. Before we know it, we have a thoroughly disgraced judiciary that administers injustice in the name of justice. So, vigilance is critical.
There is no doubt that the perennial problem of case backlog is a manifestation of a denial of justice to victims. Some of the injustices are clear. We have cases where an accused person sometimes remains in remand in the trial process for longer than the sentence or periods of imprisonment that is likely to receive in event of a conviction.
For you judge not for men, you judge not for man, but for the Lord who is with you in the judgment.
Now, about 400 procurement and accounting officers have been given a clean bill of health to resume duty after undergoing a vetting process authorized by President Uhuru Kenyatta on Madaraka Day. This was in a communication by the government spokesperson, Eric Kiraitha.
All heads of procurement and accounts in government ministries, departments, agencies, and parastatals will undergo fresh vetting, including polygraph testing, to determine their integrity and suitability. Those who shall fail the vetting will stand suspended.
It was one of President Uhuru Kenyatta's stern measures to curb a vice that has become rampant in his government: graft. The orders to suspend all procurement and accounting head units in ministries and public departments came at the peak of fresh revelations about yet another scandal at the National Youth Service. Allegations where it was estimated that about 9 billion Kenya shillings was unaccounted for. The officials, according to the president, will stay out until they were clear to resume office. In a statement, government spokesperson Eric Kiraitha said 400 procurement and accounting officers who were suspended in June had been cleared to go back to work. The statement reads, "The fresh vetting process for the first cohorts of officers is about to be concluded. Due to the extenuating circumstances, the term length for the vetting process extended beyond anticipatory period." The government spokesperson further said, and I quote, "Due to employer-employee confidentiality terms, communication to the officers as to the condition of return is to be effected by the respective authorized officers." The vetting process also involved the use of lie detectors to administer tests after it emerged that billions of public funds were swindled from public entities at the procurement level through payment of fictitious tenders. However, questions about the legality of that meant the issue has remained cloudy. The suspended officials had been further instructed to submit their personal information, including that of assets and liabilities to the Office of the Head of Public Service. The officers in the next cohort that will undergo vetting have been identified and will be informed of the process in due course. Eunice Omolo, NTV.
Remember, you can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook. And 20680-686, I should say, is our SMS portal. Let's get discussing, of course, a raft of issues that we'll be talking about this morning. And in a moment, we'll be also looking at what is headlining the front pages of the dailies today with our panelists. Allow me to introduce to you this morning Aaron Chiriot, who's a senator of Kericho. Also, we do have with us Kimani Matangi, Senator of Kiambu. We have with us as well Dr. Otende Amolo, who is a member of parliament from Marietta. We have with us as well former senator of Nyeri, this is Mutai Kagwe, and also Boni Halwale, who is a former senator of Kakamega. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Wes. All right, so of course, it's a holiday today, and we wish our Muslim brothers a good El-Udhard as well. Yeah. As they're celebrating this, we'll be also looking at some of the stories headlining our front pages of the dailies. Let's begin with the Daily Nation. What is on the front page of the Daily Nation? If we just pick up this as we discuss, and this is doggedly following the announcement by the Vice Chair of the Jubilee. It says, storming Jubilee as Ruto men clash with Uhuru ally. Murathi's no-holds-barred weekend attack on party's parliamentary leadership for disrespecting the president sparks a furious reaction from DP's trusted aides who accuse him of seeking to assume powers he doesn't have. This story is well fleshed out on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning. Murkomen and Washali dismiss Jubilee Party Deputy Chair as misinformed. Also, Treasury warns of hard times as debt burdens grows. Kenyans should prepare for higher taxes and more inflationary pressure to meet the demands of the country's debt repayment obligation. This is another story on the front page of the Daily Nation today. 5 shot as bullets fly at burial ceremony. 3 policemen among 5 people nursing bullet wounds after funeral service turned chaotic in Trans Nzoia County yesterday. The burial of Likuyani MP Enoch Kimunguchi's driver, Mr. Douglas Wakacha, at Mukuyu Village and Kiminini was attended by top Ford Kenya leaders. They too were caught in the gunfight. All seemed calm until Kakamega County Sports Executive Robert Kundu, I should say, Mahanu, arrived only to be met with boos from an agitated crowd as Mr. Dr. Kibunguchi gave his condolences. This story continues on page 2 of the Daily Nation today. Kampala revolts for detained Bobby Wine is another story on page 22 of the Daily Nation today. In a moment, we shall be playing you that particular bite by David Murathe, who is the Vice Chair of the Jubilee Party, which that particular pronouncement, as we had it on Sunday, has sparked a little bit of or ruffled a little bit of some feathers within the Jubilee Party. And this is the headlining story, storming Jubilee as Ruto men clash with Uhuru ally. And one of the Ruto's men that we do have in the panel here is Aaron Cheriot. Of course, we know he is in the inner circle to tell us more. We saw on the headlines that yes, you're part of the advisory council of the Ruto committee.
I resist that title very because I am a Uhuruto man. I don't know why you want to split me from my president.
But looking at this particular headline, you must have taken special umbrage with that particular pronouncement from David Murathe as well. Tell us more about this. What is happening?
You know, this is something that I've been saying. First of all, in my opinion, this is not. This does not deserve to be a headline story because you're making a small man to be so huge and giving him such an important title, Uhuru ally. You know, I have seen this, and I have raised this with you a few weeks ago, where media sort of creates a certain narrative, then finds characters to fill up the story, sort of to give it the kind of life that is trying to be given here. David Murathe, the likes of him and his colleagues who are in office in the Jubilee Party, are to me just clerks that were given out, whose names actually were given to the registrar of political parties in partial fulfillment of the law that requires that certain names of party officials be given so that the party could be registered. But nothing beyond that. They do not speak for anybody. They do not hold any official title. That is why even the Jubilee as a party cannot claim to have a proper spokesman for the party, because ordinarily spokesmen for parties are the Secretary General who are elected by party members. But when you take clerks that were given just this position of privilege, maybe by account of having been in the room during the time when parties were being formed, they are told, Boni Halwale, you'll be organizing secretary, Kimani Matangi, you'll fill up this position of Secretary General. They do not hold any sway. And therefore, each and every time you continue to feed this story and you continue to excite Murathe, who holds no locus, he has no particular standing with our party members. Nobody can even pick out Murathe in a crowd of people among his Jubilee supporters. So when you say that he's speaking and he's speaking on behalf of Jubilee Party officials, it's absolute nonsense. And I think time has come for us to put that to a stop. I agree, but I said this on my Twitter yesterday, I agree with the sentiments that were raised by the Honorable Moses Kuria, that a time has come for us as a political party, like any other political party, to reorganize our house, because one of the promises we made to our membership, I remember because I was in that meeting during the merger, is that immediately after elections, we shall be holding grassroots election to strengthen our party, so that you have officials who are duly elected and can speak. You know, we need people in the grassroots who will tell the citizens of the plans and the things that are being executed by this government that they voted for, who, apart from members of parliament today, can speak in the grassroots and say, this is what you are doing about the war on corruption.
Thank you.
This is our stand on Big Four. That's why we need party elections.
All right, let's hear from Senator Mutahi Kagwe. Good morning. Good to see you after a while.
Good morning. Yes, and greetings from the farming community, which is where most of us are now. Yeah, I think that I don't quite agree with what my colleague says, because however the officials become officials, it does stand that they are the officials of the party. You know, irrespective of whether they have been elected or not elected, they are the officials of the party. And I think that what I could agree with him about is that the heading is misleading, really.
Is it?
It is misleading because, well, first of all, you're talking about a storm. You know, a storm insinuates that there is a huge matter, there is turbulence going on. It is very normal in political parties. It is very normal in political parties for people to sometimes have differing opinions. Now, having said that, I think that what we should be thinking about and what we should be talking about is a substance rather than the execution of by who is executing it. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that is there substance in what Murathe is saying? And that's the debate. I think that's where the debate should be. But to put a headline like this one that's saying storm in Jubilee, you know, I mean, didn't you have anything else to...
So, okay. All right, so you're taking a swipe at that particular headline. What about this particular next headline that I'm just about to put up, right? Let's just have the Daily Nation so that I can actually try and retrieve also the Stars also headline. We see how it looks. What would you say about this particular headline? Just briefly, this is still touching on what we do have, excuse me, on what we're talking about this morning. And this is the Star. Hello? Where is it going to again? It's actually eluding me, but I'll put it up next. I think it's going back to the People Daily. But I'll show you what we do have on the Star, just to maybe lift up the hard copy, because that particular soft copy is eluding me. And it says Ruto allies plot Jubilee takeover in plan for 2022.
That may that may well be the case. What I'm saying is these are political maneuvers.
All right.
And it may well be or not be the case. But what I'm saying is that generally speaking, what you're noticing these days is that when you look at the media, when you have a critical look at the media, there is news that is sensational.
Yes.
And is news that is sensationalized. And in my opinion, what you are seeing now is news that is sensationalized. This, you know, there's a lot of hype about this Ruto, this, you know, the Jubilee wars, this war, that war. When as a matter of fact, all they are doing is there is a lot of healthy debate within the party. Now, if it is true that Ruto's allies are planning to take over, maybe they are. They should be. If they want to take over the presidency, they should actually be wanting to do that. They should actually be wanting to take over. It is the normal practice in politics. And there will be those who will be fighting against them not to do so. That is normal. That's what happens.
All right, so this is, as you're saying, we should just not discuss about the style, but the substance of what is really happening within Jubilee. So there is a rift and a fissure within Jubilee right now as far as 2022 is concerned. Even look at Standard today. Ruto Yeah, actually, all the headlines now is all about Ruto. Ruto music and a hate campaign. This is what we have on the front page of the Standard today. Deputy President once again at the center of controversial musical production from central Kenya, with one version making sarcastic comments on his political life and the 2022 presidential ambitions. This is on page 2. And if we may go back to the Star, maybe to just read the sub-headline there, Moses Kuria calls for elections to put active politicians in leadership amid rising fears that Central may not reciprocate support for the DPP, or for the DP, I should say. And this is well fleshed out on page 4 and 5 of the Star today. Kalole, looking at this, and you've had your fair share also within NASA as far as Ford Kenya is concerned, on how also the cookie within NASA is just about to crumble. Are you happy, or maybe what will be your sentiment about? Maybe happy is not really the term I should use this morning, but of course, looking at what is happening within Jubilee, what will be your sentiment?
I don't know whether I'm reading the same Daily Nation of today with my two colleagues here. They are saying that there's something wrong with this headline. There is something we learned in school called reported speech. What we are reading here is merely reported speech. The paper is not trying to analyze anything. They are merely reporting what took place and what's going on. So to me, I would like to tell my former university mate, David Mrade, that in my community, there is a saying that if you must collect rainwater, you don't collect it at the end of the rain. You either put there the container just before the rain starts, or while it is raining if you want to partake of that water. So my brother David Mrade, you know, the leadership of the House is not elected by political party leaders. It is elected by members of Parliament. It should disturb you that the whip in the National Assembly and the whip in the Senate, the leader of the majority in the Senate and the leader of the majority in the National Assembly are all in agreement, and they are on Ruto's side. That means if you wanted to collect the rain that falls in the Senate and the National Assembly, you should have prepared by putting your people who are allied to Uhuru in those leadership positions. The fact that the people now in the leadership positions are perceived, rightfully or otherwise, to be with Ruto, it means that it is Ruto who is controlling the legislature. You are attempting to collect the water when the rain is gone. Ruto put there his containers at the right time, and that's why he has the water. He's going to control Parliament, whether you like it or not. You can dissolve those people. He will go back because he has that majority. He's going to get the same positions again. And what's more is that what's happening. I can see obviously my good friend from Nyeri is appears to be in the Uhuru camp of Jubilee.
There is only one
just a minute.
There is only two camps in government.
That is your Jubilee. I'm speaking like an outsider. What you should wake up to is the realization that all over the world, a president in his last term is not called just a president, but he functions as a lame duck president. The president who is up to it will delay the lame duck effect so that it comes towards the very end of the last term. But if he doesn't manage it well, the way I'm seeing now you guys do, Uhuru might become a lame duck president barely 2 years into his last term. Can you manage politics?
Far from it.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Rashida Molo. Then we'll come to you.
I should have an opinion of Jubilee.
He's an observer. As an observer.
First, Debarl, I was actually hoping you will go to my extreme level before you come back to me. But now that you have come to me, let me say this. Today is an interesting panel. We have two gentlemen who are in Uhuru's camp one gentleman who is in Ruto, rather Dr. Halwale shortly. Let me say this. There is nothing wrong with any of the headlines.
Completely.
To say, you know, to attack the headlines in Nation, Star, Standard, you are shooting the messenger. And my brother, Senator Chirotia, actually says that the headline is exaggerated. Then when he starts to speak, he demonstrates why the headline is not exaggerated. Because it demonstrates the very problem that exists. He calls leaders who led the party to a victory that some of us still dispute. Now he calls them merely having been in the room when leadership positions were being offered. And those are the same words he used of Rafael Tuju in the last show, which today he uses of David Murade. It tells you there's actually a problem. And therefore the headlines are right. But for me, it is a welcome break, because for weeks on end on this show, we were always talking about the differences in NASA. And you know, we would try and move away from it, and my brother Chirodia will bring us back there. But right now he wants us to move away from this. My friend Mutahi Kagwe says there is no Uhuru, there is no Ruto, there is Uhuruto, and we all know that is not the truth. From where I sit, it is clear that the president and the deputy president are pulling in different directions in terms of where this country should go. And it is clear that a lot of elected and non-elected leaders are caught in between. It is also clear to me that there are those who are trying, in the words of Boni Halwale, to collect the water as the rain is beginning, and I suspect Boni Halwale is in that basket. I am, you know, you are my friend and brother. When I have listened to your words lately, seen your body language, and even seen some of the funerals you have attended lately, it is clear to me. All I will say is that, in my opinion, it is clear that the president and the deputy are pulling in different directions. There are a number of people who are caught in between in terms of wondering which direction they should go, and there is absolutely everything right in the newspapers and the media highlighting what needs to be highlighted. What is not true, for example, is when one quotes my brother and Moses Kuria saying now the elected leaders should assume leadership of the party. Of course, I think he knows, and all of us know, that that is not possible under the current regime of laws. As an elected leader, you cannot also then assume some of those very delicate political leadership positions. You can only assume positions maybe within parliament, but otherwise there would be conflict with the laws. But I think that to the extent that we are talking about Uhuru's camp and Ruto's camp, I think that President Uhuru has stumbled on the truth in terms of where this country should go, to the extent of their discussion with Raila on the handshake and the future of this country. The deputy president is focused not on where this country should go, yes, but how to make sure he's president in 4 years. And to that extent, I think I would sympathize with the president camp rather than one who focuses merely on capturing power.
Kimani Watangi, choose you today. Whom you will serve?
Thank you, Debarl, and let me start by saying good morning to our viewers, and thanks also to you, because on all our behalves you wished our Muslim community, yes, a good and joyous Eid. But let me say it also on behalf of my panelists that indeed we do wish them a happy Eid. And so I have to choose, so you say. But my concern was, Debarl, that Utienda Molo classified everybody to a camp and only left one person, and that is you.
I'm apolitical as far as this conversation is concerned.
It was known that you belong somewhere.
I'm apolitical.
And so, you know, most of the comments that are made here will also have to pass through your litmus test. Anyway, you know, Debarl, let me first say that I'm one of those who've been very clear in Jubilee that, and I still have the same position.
Yes.
That I think it is unhealthy. I think it is not useful to the party that we have this public sparring of Jubilee members over mundane issues, that things that could be dealt with inside the party's system. And as you've seen in some of the reports, although I've not seen that invitation, that there is likely to be a retreat. I know it's been long overdue. It was actually called for some times back when we had a meeting, a PG meeting. But even without a meeting or a retreat, the party has got its own internal structures where leaders, whether elected or not elected,
yes,
can be able to dialogue. And one of the things I want to clearly say and disassociate myself with is this public sparring. What is it for? Who stands to benefit? I mean, when you have these people saying this, and then you are, you know, firing back again, you know, I think I would want to take the opportunity to say it to all my Jubilee colleagues in leadership position. You know, stop this thing. It's not helping us at all. Use the privilege you have of your positions to address any matters that come to you. I mean, pick a phone and call your colleague, or then call a meeting in offices. But you know, when we have this thing, and let me tell you, Debarl, and let me say to viewers this morning, if there is anything we have done in Jubilee, it is working so hard to put this party where it is today. And more so to embrace the responsibilities we have right now of ensuring that we deliver services to the people in this country as government. And that's what I want to remind leaders, that we are government. So once we distract from the agenda of what we should do to build the country and give people hope, and then now we are back to small cubicles of shadow boxing and name calling, it's a disfavor to this country, and I want to call them out of order completely. That they shouldn't go that way. Now, secondly, you know, some of the things said here, maybe I could comment on them from you know, distance. Like, for example, on the necessity of elections. Yes, it is true, elections would be good, they can be held, but of course, Debarl and viewers this morning, political party elections can either be the making or the breaking of a party. Jubilee needs to be very careful and well planned, very well planned parties, elections, such that if we are to hold elections, then we should be careful that it does not become again the dominant agenda. We have a lot of fighting amongst everybody from the ward level, and the whole country is in election mood again because of political party elections. We have to be very careful. Now, on this issue of that the name of the Deputy President, William Ruto, that has dominated the headlines all over. Yes, I mean, it is evidence then that he's one of the top contenders for that position. And what is wrong with that? You know, they say in politics, any publicity is good publicity. And I don't think there is any bad publicity in what he's been getting. If indeed anyone has any questions about whether he belongs to this school of thought or he belongs to the other camp, the most important thing to say, which he has not denied and nobody is going to deny, is that he's a candidate for 2022 and he's the Jubilee Deputy President. He's our number 2. Okay. Now, lastly, let me just make this final comment, because you know we've been labeled to belong to camps, including you have just told me when I was starting at choose ye thou today. That's what you said to me. You know, if there is any campaign that has been done by the likes of Otiende Amolo before, and you heard him really laughing and speaking in such a joyous voice about now, at least it is, the limelight is off NASA, it is now on Jubilee. If you listen to the comments of Boni Halowale, and you started it very well, although you let him off the hook, that at least now he can talk about someone else and not about the woes of his party. If there is any one thing that right now that this gentleman will be happy about, is to talk about Jubilee. But I tell you, we are clear in our minds as daylight, is that we have a structure in our party that gives us the head of the party and his deputy. And the party, as we started, had two colors. First when we started, red and yellow. Ruto and Uhuru. URP and TNA. And then we merged. Come 2017, we increased that number by bringing in another more than 20 parties that came in. So we are a national party. We are Uhuruto when we started. Now we are Jubilee.
Thank you.
As a party of the country. So please allow us to do the work that we have.
Thank you.
Between now and 2020.
Before we come to Aaron, you had something to say, Senator Kagwe. I hope you've not lost your track of thought.
What I was saying, I was saying this, that whereas I agree with Wamatangi basically on the fact that he wants a very smooth structure in Jubilee, this, a party has to be alive. Part of the work of a party sometimes is to disagree, but the hallmark of it all is when they agree to disagree. And the point is this: it is not nice either for a party to be absolutely, docile and nothing is happening in there. And it is politics. So it is bound to be out there in the public. I think that the manner in which we are executing our differences, to me, is healthy. All right? There is nothing wrong with what I'm seeing. But what I think would be very dangerous, is to go into a Jubilee election in the current state. Because if a Jubilee election would be handled the way the nominations of Jubilee were handled, that would be the end of the political party. That would be the end of the party. Because as it is one of the biggest threats. The results of that nomination to this day, continue to be part of the threat. And when you see these differences that are becoming a bit obvious, is that nomination was so badly done that to this day it has got an effect on the party and the feelings and the image of the party. Having said that, I don't see anything particularly major or stormy. These are small things, small differences that are happening in the party that can be easily overcome.
Right, small things, but of course, as always, we had Dr. Otiende telling us this might be a very big tectonic shift. We call them minor and fissures that will be happening within Jubilee Party or even a NASA coalition as well. That's what we've always been saying, but we can see also, just a moment before you come to, could we just listen to that particular bite by Murage before we continue with Aaron Cheriot? What he had to say, and this has actually taken, people have taken special umbrage with this particular pronouncement.
There was not a single time when the president said it is not going to be, or that he will not support and campaign for the deputy president. So we're finding it a bit unfair for sections of our leaders to divide our people. These are Ruto's people, these are Uhuru's people. When you say these are Ruto's people and these are Uhuru's people, what are you saying? Are you saying that Uhuru's people are not Ruto's people? No. There is no way Ruto can become president without Uhuru's support and without Uhuru's people.
And of course, it's just a snippet of what he had to say on that particular interview. But Aaron Cheriot, let's move on. And
at least to the extent of the clip that you have played, I see absolutely nothing wrong with what Murade is saying, because basically what he's echoing are the same sentiments which Senator Kagwe and I are mentioning today, that there is no division per se in Jubilee. What we are having are differences in opinion, and how we express is what is being in contention. Of course, the likes of my good friend Otiende would wish that we discuss this perceived divide, because at least it is a welcome relief from the ghost that exists in the party that is a member in, where there is a whole lot of further confusion than what you are seeing in Jubilee. And
but here is a Discord before you go on. Because if you may just look at page 4 of the Daily Nation, we have a snippet of a Discord, because I said we didn't really play the whole of it, but where we have, he says that party vice chairman Dev Murade has accused National Assembly Majority Leader Eden Duale and Chief Whip Benjamin Washali, together with Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen, of casting aspersions on the president's judgment by opposing the government. Of course, if you read the rest of it, is where you can get all the gritty details of this.
You see, Murade comes from an archaic school of thought where they confuse government with the president. You know, there's a whole lot of difference between President Uhuru and the government that he leads. That is, as legislators, especially those of us who are in Jubilee, many are the times that we find ourselves in the very conflicting positions raised by the fact that we occupy a dichotomy of duties. One, I am a legislator, and two, I am in Jubilee. What is the extent to which at times I am allowed to speak as Senator for Kericho, and what is the time that I'm allowed to speak as a senator from Jubilee as a party? There will always be those grey moments where there'll be moments of disagreement where I'll say, on this one, I do not agree with this move by the government. And it's fairly normal. It is part of our duty as parliament. But I think Murathe is confusing this with the old KANU days where KANU was Baba and Mama, and whatever the government said was right, and anybody else who held a contrary opinion was considered to be a dissident. I do not think that a modern party like Jubilee should be led by that kind of ethos. It is normally expected that when you're leading a political party as large as Jubilee, and I am sure this is where the leaders that he's quoting, that is Eden Duale, Benjamin Washiali, and Murkomen, find themselves sometimes conflicted, because I know, for example, take an example of the issue he has with Ben Washiali. Ben Washiali is MP for Mumias. A sugar for, what is the correct name of his constituency? Boni. Mumias East. A constituency where I think 100% of his voters are sugarcane growers on an issue that is so primal and cardinal to the people that you represent in parliament. You cannot be seen to be treasuring the position of chief whip of a political party more than the people that sent you to parliament. He has to speak for his people. And when, for example, when Duale spoke about wholesalers that were being harassed, and most of them, he said, come from his constituency and the community that he comes from, he said, you must first remember that I am MP for Garissa Town before being majority leader, and therefore allow me today to speak as MP for Garissa Town. Therefore, this happens in political leadership. However, having said that, I think I want to agree with what Senator Mutahi Kagwe has said, in the extent that there are certain things that haven't been made so clear to the membership of the Jubilee Party, so much so that if today we were to call for party elections of official positions in the current form and state, things will not go so well for us as a party. And therefore, time has come for our party leadership at the very highest level, that is the president and his deputy, to listen to the kind of sentiments that are being raised by leaders within their party, and consider whether is it time for them to consider a retreat and listen to the issues that are continuing to be raised, or they want to continue with the path that we currently exist, where everybody is allowed to air their opinion, sometimes to the detriment of the party.
All right, and I think we should be summing up this particular talk of Jubilee, but we'll be remiss if we don't really talk about also Ruto in the same breath, because he's been, I think, in Western, and he was asking the leadership in Western to support him, because he did that in 2007, so they should be returning the favor. And what we fail to understand, and it is most consternating to us, is the fact that Ruto has been very categorical that we should avoid the 2022 politics. But he is here also double speaking in Western Kenya about 2022 politics as well. Let's just pick up from there, Boni Khalwale.
I think I'm privileged to have been at that function.
Yes.
And I don't need to read the papers to recall what transpired and what he said. He said very clearly that one, Musalia Mudavadi and Raila Odinga owe him. If Musalia has got a political debt, that debt cannot be assumed to be the debt of the community. So Musalia's and Ruto's arrangement and Raila's arrangement, those were private arrangements. They were not community commitments. In fact, the time he was speaking to, 2007, our community was not 100% in ODM. At that time, Soita Shitanda, myself, Mohisa Kitui, Moses Wetangula, we were comfortably elected on different parties. On my side, New Fort Kenya, and Soita, and the others on Fort Kenya. So if there are any debts to be settled, they are personal, but not to be extended to be community debts. Having said that, then I want to urge Deputy President and Musalia Mudavadi to pursue Kenyans in pursuit of trying to persuade them to get their support, and not to expect them because one comes from a particular community and then that community owes them. Yes.
Right. And it seems also the Deputy President William Ruto, maybe he gave amnesty to, you know, the Mount Kenya community in terms of indebtedness. Now he's actually shifted this indebtedness also, or indebtedness now, to the Western Kenya as well. Maybe we can hear from Dr. Otieno Amolo. Now you're indebted.
Well,
amnesty to the Mount Kenya region, where he said now they owe me nothing. They owe me no debt.
Let me say two things. But first, before I get there, let me comment on what Senator Cheruiyot was saying about government and the presidency and the leadership of parliament. I think in fairness, it is important for us to agree and accept that in a presidential system such as what we have, if by happenstance, as we have now, the president is also from the party that has the majority in parliament, then necessarily the president will depend on the leadership in parliament to push the government agenda. And that therefore presupposes that the leadership in parliament will basically sing the same tune as the president, read government in this case. And therefore the dichotomy between the president and the government that my brother here is trying to create is artificial, and it would not work in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. The only overriding factor is that it is still expected that even the leadership and even those from the majority side, which is also the president's side, all of us collectively must still provide oversight over the executive. But you cannot therefore say that you are following government and not following the president, when yet the president is the chief executive. Those dichotomies actually speak to where the problem is. I think that problem is right now a lot of members of parliament, aspiring members, former members are caught in between what the president aspires for and what the deputy president aspires for. The president has chosen to aspire for what is right for this country. Yes. Necessarily because I think he's on his second term. The deputy president is aspiring for anything that will make him clinch the presidency in 2022. Yes. So the question is either what is right for the country or what is right for Ruto. And that's the dilemma that a lot of politicians are in. Mm-hmm. Coming to his speech in Western, yes, I think that we all know that the deputy president has been providing us with doublespeak on a number of things. It is doublespeak on the handshake. It is doublespeak on 2022. And so when he said that Western owe him, two things struck me. First, the reasoning does not add up. Boni Halwale was there, as he says. You cannot say that that you had agreed that if you capture government, then Raila would be president, Mudavadi deputy, and you are prime minister. Then when you don't capture that government and there are only 2 seats, you still expect that the person who was to be president and the person who was to be deputy should step aside so that Kibaki remains president and you become prime minister. That reasoning is just curious because it's not logical. But what's more fundamental is that it is a fact that as much as Raila, as much as Uhuru say, let's not focus on 2022, let us focus on what's good for this country. And the deputy president sometimes agrees with that. The truth is, he's been focusing day and night on 2022. Yes. He focuses on it, and that's why he travels within and without the country focusing on it. That is why he tries to woo, a number of brothers, especially in Western. And that is why when he goes to, to the Mount Kenya region, he would say, I'm not indebted, because he wants to speak the language the president is speaking. But when he goes to Western, he wants to persuade my brother Halwale and the others that please come this way. And that's what he does at the coast. That's what he does I think he's just not found a way of coming to Nyanza, but I suspect he'll be trying to come, and he'll probably be starting to say that, you know, in 2007, you know, I was with you, and therefore you need to come back, you know. But I think the bottom line is that the deputy president is in a campaign mode. Many of us are focusing on beyond 2022. That is the difference.
Right. There's just something small that I would wish that I think shouldn't go unchallenged in what Otiende has said.
You don't think we should take a short break, then we come back? It's almost, actually, it's 8 on the
just
dot.
10
we circle back.
Just 10
okay,
seconds.
10 seconds.
The fact that the deputy president spoke directly to Mudavadi and Raila doesn't mean that he was speaking to the Luhya community. He says, I supported you gentlemen. Yeah. So how then does that translate to mean that he was telling the Luhya community that you have a debt? So the master of double speak should be Otiende Omolo.
After the break, I will enlighten my brother.
Otiende says he will revisit. He will revisit that after, of course, the short break. You're watching People and Politics. When we circle back, we'll continue with that particular discussion. In the dailies today, in the Daily Nation, on the front page, storm in Jubilee as Ruto men clash with Uhuru ally. Also on the front page of the Star, this is your headline as well. Ruto's allies plot Jubilee takeover in plan for 2022. That is what we have on the front page of the Star. Also, I shall show you the Taifa Leo as well, which is holding this particular headline. Interestingly, all the dailies, it seems, are holding this. This is what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Plan B ya Ruto. It says, wandani wake wasajili chama cha huku kampeni ya kutaka Jubilee isimamie na wanasiasa ikishika kasi. That is a story that we have on the front page of Time. I also tucked away, it says that mgogoro wa kisiasa katika chama cha Jubilee umechochea naibu rais William Ruto kuanzisha mikakati mbadala ya kumwezesha kuwania urais kwenye uchaguzi mkuu mwaka wa 2022. That is what we have on the front page of not 2022, but Taifa Leo. Also, we do have the Standard as well. I just want to show what we have on the front page of the Standard. Ruto music and a hate campaign. That is what we have on the front page of the Standard. Deputy President once again at the center of controversial musical production from Central Kenya, with one version making sarcastic comments on his political life and 2022 presidential ambitions. But I just want to also play this particular clip that we had it over the weekend on where this basis of 2022 politics is all about and the indebtedness that Ruto is talking about. Just take a listen.
Naomba kwa unyenyekevu, sisemi kwa lazima. Lakini mzuri niseme ama ni namna gani? Heri niseme, msiniambie siku nyingine mbona ulikuwa na maneno na haukusema. Mimi nauliza nyinyi, mnaona hapo iko makosa kweli? Kwa sababu ile mimi niliwasaidia. Ule akakuwa prime minister, ule mwingine akakuwa deputy. Saa hii mimi ndio nimekaribia. Sasa wakiniunga mkono iko makosa? Sasa iko haja gani ya kusungukana tena? Simu nisaidie tu nifike haraka hivi, alafu maneno.
Sasa na Ruto amekuja kudai nyinyi mko na deni yake. Wache mambo ya kudai madeni bwana. Sisi hatuna deni lake. Tunaelewana kabisa. Lakini tunamheshimu kama Mkenya, si ndio? Na tekeleze kazi yake ya Mungu. Sasa hiyo haijulikani. Lakini tuende tukijua hatuna deni lake.
All right, we just want to hear from Kimani Matangi. Your reaction, please, before we took a short break. We were to come back or circle back with you.
Well, thanks, Debarl, but I thought you had already declared that I'm exempt because Mount Kenya has been exempt. Or is it that what you said?
So
no, you said we had been relieved of the debt.
There's amnesty.
And actually, I remember you gave Otiende Amolo a lot of time because you said now the burden of proof has shifted to them. But anyway, Debarl, I think as you've shown, even in the Taifa Leo newspaper there, well, it's an interesting thing to have the name of Ruto and of course his work and mission in all the dailies headlining. That tells you that something is happening about him. I mean, it's not just a mean thing to find yourself in all the dailies being the headlines. So that tells you there could be something to look at, in that angle. But coming to this question and issue of debts, I hope we can remember very well, especially in 2007. If you remember the events of 2007, just before the elections, Ruto and Raila actually went for a nomination together, or an election, to determine who was going to be the candidate. And this at that point had almost looked like it was going to be a big issue on who was going to be their flag bearer. But then they resolved, let us go for nominations. And you remember the events in Kasarani. And then after that exercise. And it is good to be fair, and because history bears the records, that indeed Ruto was very magnanimous in defeat. I mean, it's the truth. He said, fine, I have lost, and so I will back my brother. That's the way it was, And so, having said that, then really, if he feels then that from his actions, some of those he was with, even subsequently, then as he said, he would be asking them to back him. I do not think entirely, as my colleagues have said, that he would be speaking about communities, but let me just finalize that comment, because I don't want to dive into it long. That there is nothing that I believe the Deputy President knows more than what it takes to clinch the job he's looking for.
Yes.
And if by dint of what I've seen him doing, then I'm sure he understands it, that it is service delivery, that it is faithfulness to staying the course, that it is a record that you must show, that it is performance that people will judge, and that is the cause, other than the politics of it, when he has to probably make a few comments here and there, some of them maybe intended to enlighten the mood, or to lighten the mood in political rallies, but the base, the truth, and that one I hope and I believe from what I see he knows, is that the core thing, the main thing that will determine whether he becomes president or not. And I can tell you one thing, speaking about those debts that we've spoken about. The debt in Luo land, whether there's a debt in Luya land, whether there's a debt in Mount Kenya, Kenyans now have moved way off that parameter. It is not about debts. It is about the performance. Actually, Kenyans will not be voting at all on the question of whether this person comes from this community, comes from this tribe, whether he ran at a certain time or did not run, whether he has had this career for how long, whether he is expecting or not. It will be on, have you performed? Do you rise high enough to step on the pedestal of performance?
Thank you.
For you to be called the president of this country. I think that will be the main question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's hear
and
from,
I believe that Ruto knows that.
Yeah, let's just hear from Kabwe, then we wind up on it and we'll look at other issues as well.
I want to agree. I want to agree with my colleagues about this issue of political debt. I think that the only debt that that should be owed to Kenyans by politicians, because the debt that you have is to perform when you have been elected, in whatever office you have been elected. That is the debt that we have. Otherwise, if we go to political debts, and we talk about this one has a debt for this and one has a debt for the other one, then what we are going to ask ourselves is, how far back do these political debts go? And Wamatangi has just pointed out, for example, in 2007, when the Honorable Ruto, acknowledged and said that I have been defeated, so I am going to support Uhuru. In 2002, the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga said that Kibaki tosha. So when we go to debts, then you start asking yourself, who owes who what debt? Because as Lightry Bone Kalwale said, personally, I am a voter. I vote in Nyeri. I have never signed any agreement with anybody about any debts, about voting for anybody. And that's why it is called secret ballot. People go and vote secretly, because it doesn't, if it is a question of, if it was a debt repayment, then you'd be sitting there and being told, line up here, let me see whether you are paying my debt or not. But the fact that we go to secret ballots then means that there is no such thing as political debts. What there is individuals who have got their own arrangements and their own agreements. Say, Debarl, why don't I support you this time? Next time you support me. Now, the fact that Debarl, you are saying that you are going to support me, does not necessarily mean that your community is going to support me. It simply means that you'll be trying. You'll be trying to convince whatever stake you have, whoever stakeholders follow you, you'll be trying to convince them to vote for Bonnie. It does not necessarily mean that they will do that, and therefore it becomes very, very difficult to to tell somebody that I want your support and you will support me at such and such a time. I think that is in politics. It has never worked.
Thank you. Right. Let's say from Boni Halwale and then we move on to
just a small rebuttal.
You have to respond to
my brother Amolo Tiende. You are talking about Ruto coming to woo voters in Western Province. And I looked at you, body language, and the way your eyes were slanted towards me, and the sarcasm is as if there is anything we are supposed to explain as a community of Western Province when Ruto comes calling to seek for votes. Let me tell you what we say in my community. That if you marry, and with due respect to the women of this republic, if you marry a woman and then you find that he doesn't conceive, the community expects that even without announcing, you have to experiment so that you find out whether it is you who has a problem or it is the lady who has a problem. So, because
you go to the doctor and they check.
Not to the doctor.
It's good you clarify.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to, you know. But is a doctor. Since he's a doctor, can he tell us exactly how these experiments are?
So we have been in a childless marriage, because when you go to a coalition is because you want to form government. We've been in a coalition 3 times, 2007, 2013, 2017, and that coalition is not bearing the baby called leading the government of Kenya. So now we are responding to the pressure from the community that please steer clear of this childless marriage. Find out whether the problem is you or the lady you had married. So allow another girl or other girls to prove that we are impotent. So I want to encourage you to tell whoever has sent you to say those things. Just like he was allowed to woo voters in Western Province, other presidential candidates are welcome, including our own sons. Point number 2 on the same, you have challenged me about the nature of funerals I'm attending. and in whose company I've been seen. For God's sake, please don't
choose who is going to die.
You don't choose. In fact, as a matter of fact, Wamatangi, just a few weeks ago, I was in Onyanyiro village in the Game constituency of Siaya County. Usually you go to a funeral because there is something personal about the dead person, and you others, you can't attend all funerals. You can't attend all funerals. So nothing political in those funerals of money. It is just that
or the company. You also don't choose who's going to attend.
Yes. And if the reason why you're saying those things is partly because I was seen with the deputy president over the weekend, let me tell you, why didn't you complain those many times when I was being seen by Raila Odinga in public functions in Kenya?
But finally, but innuendo has it that you've been warming up, or maybe the Ford Kenya has been warming up to Deputy President William Ruto.
Yeah, people are running ahead of ourselves. We will make our own formal announcements. As the issue of debt has been discussed extensively, we have nobody's debt as a party. So if we choose to continue working with Raila, it will be choice. If we choose to work with Ruto, it will be because we have now found that Ruto has what Nyerere called. Nyerere alisema wa Tanzania sio tu tufanye kazi na wenzetu, lazima tufanye kazi na wale ambao wako na fikra endelezi. Sasa kama mtu wako na fikra endelezi and we work with them, that would be perfectly in order.
Right.
But now in conclusion, the significance, Otiende, don't be surprised, the significance of Ruto being in the media all the time, and at the same time, Ruto being in the media all the time, and at the same time people referring to my community, it is because of 2 things. Ruto is starting to cut an image of the front runner. Give it to him. Secondly, my community, and whether you like it or not, we form the biggest voting bloc in Kenya today. So where we vote will decide who becomes the president of Kenya.
All right, let's get it. Let's hear from let's wind it up.
A substantial voting block.
Let me say three things.
Yes,
not the biggest.
Let me say three things. First of all, I never knew my brother here, Senator Cheruiyot, to be a spin master. You know, we just heard what the deputy president said in Western. He said, nawaomba, munisaidie. And even in response, Mudavadi says, sisi hatuna deni. There was nothing personal. Ruto was not asking Mudavadi for his vote.
For his support.
He was asking the community. And he was telling them, your leader here, Mudavadi, we agreed and I supported him. Now it is time for you people to support me. Those were his words. So you can't start spinning that now that is a personal debt. He was asking for the personal vote. In any event, leaders are never asked for personal votes. Just as we've had Halwale, but I'll be coming back to him shortly. He says, we in Western, we have the biggest bloc. Do you think Halwale is now speaking personally? He only has one vote. He's speaking for the community.
Yes.
Because at that level, it's collegiate, it's communal. And that's what Ruto was asking. But I agree with Senator Kabgo that if we started going the way of who owes who debt, Ruto's debt will be number 7. Because the debt will start right from Jaramogi in 1963. You know? And it will come all the way to Moi's original debt, which was paid because he became president. And by the time you get to now 2002,
yes,
when Raila's debt still remains unpaid, you will get to Kalonzo Musyoka in 2007 before you get to Ruto, because he too will say he supported, you know, and he was promised that he will now be the president. So I think going the way of debt is the wrong way to go, because, you know, like Okonkwo says,
yes,
you start with those who are owed the largest amount of debts before you come to those, yes, and for the longest time, before you come to those of recent debt and which are very meager. Secondly, I like Dr. Boni Halwale because he has come out in his true colors. I think it is no longer secret that Dr. Boni Halwale is oscillating, is cajoling, is moving quite fast and furiously so to be with the deputy president in his quest for 2022. The only mistake he makes is that instead of saying I, Dr. Boni Halwale, he says we lawyers. Where he gets that, I don't know. I think it is always much better to speak for yourself on these matters.
He thinks he has seen where the rain is.
Yeah, which is okay, but as long as he says I have seen, not we have seen as lawyers. You know, I perfectly understand. I perfectly understand. You know, keep your happiness, you know, slowly. Because I know you're quite happy with that kind of thing. You know, come slowly on this matter. Yes. So every word Halwale was saying, the guy was almost jumping. Now, let me say this. Let me say this, Dr. Halwale. I think the example you gave is unfortunate, because I was tempted to ask you to explain your version of experimentation. Because that experimentation analogy, especially for a medical doctor, I think will take us to a very dangerous ground. So if you must experiment as a lawyer, please don't encourage all lawyers to experiment in that manner. Okay? I think that I agree with Senator Wamatangi. Right now, there are two things that are the biggest problems in this country. One is impunity in terms of corruption, in terms of death of integrity.
Yes.
The second one is absence of cohesion and the death of nationalism.
Yes.
I think the leader and leaders who will emerge in 2022 and beyond will not be on the basis of who has dished the most amount of money,
yes,
who has traversed the country the most, who has called in the debts the most. It must be, which is that leader, or who is that leader who aspires to what we want: cohesion and nationalism, integrity and lack of impunity. And to that extent, I agree with Mama Tangi that we should start focusing, because we can't be complaining that these are our biggest evils, then we put that aside, and then on the other side we are focusing on who calls the most debts, who gives the most money, and that kind of thing, because then that's a contradiction. I think that the time has come when we must choose leaders based on what we want. We can't be wanting good leadership and then we go for the wrong things. And I think that is the future, not where Dr. Boni Halwale's wishes to take us.
Right, thank you. I think we should wind up on this. We need to discuss also other issues as far as indebtedness is concerned as well. And I'll just read some few of tweets that we have this morning. Here we have Kabando who is agreeing with Boni Halwale. He says, agreed, Boni. Right, so I don't know what party is agreeing, if it's agreeing with experimenting or is agreeing with other issues that you've really talked about this morning. It's not really elucidated that. Also, we have Moses Gidiga saying, if Raila and Mudavadi debt to Ruto does not translate to community, then Uhuru owes him not Kikuyu community. Also, we have Abdallah Madambo saying, first of all, quit the 2022 talk. We just had elections. Can the leaders get to work fast and give up all the grabbed land and stolen money? Let's revisit 2022 in 2021. We are tired. Kwani hakuna kazi hata kwa wanasiasa. This is what Abdallah Madambo is talking about. Also, David Ludogoli is saying Jubilee was a vehicle to be used just to ascend to power. Now everyone is on his own. Will there a natural death because of infighting, especially for wealth? We have Jack Adienge saying Jubilee Party is threatened by the legacy politics versus succession politics at play. The division will widen if Uhuru Kenyatta chooses the path of truth, justice, a long-term political legacy. And we have Original Kisii saying Ruto's double-speak means a lot. It means the degree of confusion is high. Ruto's main hope was on Uhuru's supporters, but things have changed and he must move on. That is what Original Kisii is saying. And of course, I can see, yes, a rush of tweets really coming through thick, and we shall be reading some of them also much late in the course of the program. But I want just to draw your attention also on the front page of the Daily Nation as we're talking about indebtedness. And I think now we are done with the politics. Can we look at the people where they're really concerned as far as the livelihood is? It looks, right? There's a bleak outlook there. We have Treasury's warning on hard times as debt burden grows. This is on page 8 of the Daily Nation, and it says that Kenyans should prepare for higher taxes and more inflationary pressure to meet the demands of country's debt repayment obligations. And 2.48 trillion shillings gross domestic debt increased by 366.5 billion shillings for the period 2017 to 2018. And 2.66 trillion shillings external public debt increased by 527 billion shillings for the period 2017-2018. And of course, you can see it is going higher and higher and higher. 331.6 billion shillings cumulative external financing for the period 2017-2018, and 273.7 billion shillings net domestic borrowing for the period 2017-2018. This is a staggering amount. And we've had Treasury notes, of course, admitting that we've crossed the red line. As far as they're concerned, we're still, of course, on the safe zone as far as this debt is concerned. But there has been a big question, and this is in light of also the Building Bridges initiative that we do know is in the offing, and it's been given a 1-year period. And so far, we understand also there's lack of financing or resources for this particular initiative as well. Can we just tackle and talk about this in light of what is happening? Comes September the 1st, many Kenyans also will be suffering because of fuel prices that will go up. We know this will also cascade down to food products, matatu, transport. I mean, things will just be very expensive in this country. Are we teetering on the brink of economic crisis as far as debt is concerned? Let's just be very candid this morning as we, of course, try to tackle this for the next half an hour.
Interestingly, Debarl, if today was not a holiday, the Finance Bill 2018 would have come for second reading in the National Assembly, which has everything to do with this kind of discussion that you're having this morning. And interestingly so, and this is why members of the public shouldn't see some of the decisions that we make as if it is obsession with politics. It is because it has an influence on this. If we were to follow up and link this to the earlier debate we were having about party leadership and why they should take certain positions. For example, take an example. When Finance Bill 2018 is tabled on the floor of Parliament this afternoon, or for this case tomorrow afternoon, as a party, as a member of a political party, do you just vote with your decision that has been made by your party leader and say that we want to tax our way into prosperity? Or do you first recede back into your conscience and look at the people that you represent and speak for them before speaking for party? This forms an obvious basis for this debate, because for a long time, Kenyans have complained that we are paying far too much taxes, and we feel that the same do not translate into tangible services. For example, you'd expect that for the amount of taxes Kenyans are paying, the cost of fuel will be way lower, and when you go to hospitals, you get better services and not have to pay through an arm and a leg the way we are getting to pay. So the cardinal, the point of debate, there are certain things that when we come to look at it, this particular debate is, what is the position of you as a leader and the people that you represent? There are two things that I'd want to point out in relation to this kind of debt. What is government trying to do when it raises amounts, huge amounts of money through ways and means that are not, of course, in tandem with the wishes of the people? Of interest and great debate, for example, as part of the proposals that are being made, is to repeal the very famous interest rates law that the Finance Bill of 2018 proposes that we should scrap it now and revert back to the old days where banks used to charge in excess of 24 to 25% for loans that are borrowed. I do not expect any member of parliament that has the interest of the people that he represents at heart to support that kind of legislation. It will be taking this country back. It will be absolutely wrong and immoral, if I may say, if as a leader you stand up to support that kind of thinking. On the issue of external debt, because that should be our biggest cause of worry. Economically speaking, if we borrow internally, chances are the economies of scale will self-regulate to a point that they will get to a point where there is nothing more to borrow. The danger actually, to me, lies more in the external debt, because a time will come, as we've been reading lately, where as a country we may find that our first charge on our budget, that is, which is to pay debt, may be far more than even the vote on development. Right now it's still safe because we are keeping it at less than 40%. But if we keep on borrowing to this level, and this is where we must keep Treasury in check and ask the hard questions, notwithstanding, never minding that the likes of Murathe would wish that we sing and say that whatever government has decided as Jubilee legislators, we should support it. I think a time has come for us to say, Treasury, can you match your borrowing with the services to Mwananchi? Can we first see that for this amount that we have consumed, this 3 to 4 trillion shillings, what is the return? Can we first stop and hold our borrowing until a point where we say that we are comfortably seeing the results of our borrowing? Then we can now go out to borrow. That should form the basis of our discussion when we begin this debate in Parliament tomorrow.
Right, but the argument has always been advanced that the trajectory will come later, you know, as in the trajectory maybe of the SGR, the way we've borrowed money, we know we'll realize the benefits of SGR much later, but not in the foreseeable or the short-term period that we are looking at as well.
They say figures do not lie. Let Treasury table the figures for us, at least that are in tandem with their projections. Let us see that for the debt for SGR, for example, this is what we projected for 2018-2019. Then we can easily compare and say, if you're projecting that you will be carrying 1 million tons of cargo by 2018, let us see how much you're carrying.
Right. So can we really say that we're looking at a very healthy balance sheet as far as Kenya is concerned?
Well, I don't know about a healthy balance sheet, but I know that it is not necessarily a bad balance sheet. Now, you know, Debarl, it is good to ask ourselves a number of questions when it comes to government macro and microeconomic, especially macroeconomics. The issue here is this, Debarl.
Yes.
A, what are we borrowing for? Because the worst thing that you can do as, in any borrowing format is to borrow to consume. If you borrow to consume, you will sink. And if you look at the economies of nations that have collapsed, all the way from Greece when it was collapsing to Venezuela today, you know, etc., you will find that a lot of those nations borrowed to consume, which means that you are living way beyond your means. So if you can borrow in production-oriented areas, it is possible for you to service the debts. And of course, you must be careful so that the amount of money you are paying is that money which you can be able to repay. Now, where I think we might be going wrong is where you cannot borrow money and instead of repaying with the sources of income for whatever you borrowed, you go to the wananchis and tax them more, you know, so that they can pay for the, you know, for the debts that you have accumulated. And I think that is what is beginning to happen today. So that we are borrowing money for long-term projects, but with terms which mean that we have to pay currently. We are not, you know, the repayment that we have is current, while the projection of the incomes from the projects that we have put forward are long-term in nature. Therefore, I think that I agree with the latest directive by the President that let us not have new projects. Because effectively what you'd be doing is overextending yourself. If you look at our debt ratios at the moment, we are way below many countries in the world. We are way below Japan and other nations. But the point is that it's not a question of how much you owe. It's a question of your ability to pay. You know, what is the ability to service the debt? And every time we are talking about debts, let's always remember that Kenyans will always want to talk about what they want to spend. They want a new road, they want a new hospital, they want a new this, and they want a new the other. The question has always been, where is the debate about where this money is coming from? Is this money going to come from tourism, and therefore, how much money are we putting in tourism? Is this money going to come from transport and saving the roads? For example, when you do a railway, it means that you can save the expenditure on maintenance of roads. And that's why in most countries on earth, civilized nations anywhere, we always have a railway system. And a railway system cannot be priced just on its own per se. You know, it has got to be priced within the framework of how much money you are saving in terms of maintenance of roads, how much time you are saving people to travel from one place to the other. You know, so it is a holistic cost rather than just a singular cost, and the benefits must be calculated as such. So, Debarl, what we are saying is, I think that we should not be going for any consumption-oriented projects by way of borrowing. If you are going to tax people then for consumption. If you are going to be taxed more, let's be taxed so that our hospitals can be beefed up, so that our schools can be beefed up, but not for external borrowing, not for external debt servicing, because then that is unsustainable. Our debt servicing should be coming from the proceeds, from the incomes we are getting from the projects that we borrowed for.
Thank you. Boy Kalwale.
I couldn't have put it better than what Mutai has said, but not surprising because of his kind of background. But let me push it a little bit further. There is something called logic. Logic demands that A, it is government which went into wanton borrowing. And B, that it is government which is now crying wolf that hard times ahead because of the borrowing which themselves did. So logic demands that we say it is government to blame. Members of the public, if it was in if it was in Western democracies, the government would be saying that we should go to a general election so that we replace it that are unable to manage the affairs of the state. However, because we are where we are, let me just emphasize one point. What was the money that they borrowed used for? Had it been clearly thought out, then using standard gauge rail line as an example,
then the money that was put into the standard gauge rail line should by now not be a burden to the taxpayer. It should be the standard gauge rail line now starting to pay back or pay off for that loan. But then what happened? In the case of the standard gauge rail line, a good excellent idea, but jokers then, instead of allowing the original thinking to be the one that was being funded, because of greed to try and make easy money, they have now gotten a project which is half complete, to the extent that whether it takes 100 years or whatever number of years, if the standard gauge rail line does not move from Mombasa to Malava to Kampala to Kigali and Bujumbura, it will never pay off, because it is supposed to lift cargo from the port in Mombasa to those points, then for it to be. But if you do it because you are lifting cargo from Mombasa to Nairobi, it will never pay off.
It will never pay off. Let's hear from Dr. Otene Amola.
On this, I agree completely with Dr. Halwale. Despite the handshake,
yes,
and especially before the handshake, we have said consistently, and I'm quite happy to hear Senator Cheruiyot drifting in this direction. We said before the last election, 2017, we said after the election, that the administration was over-borrowing. The debt burden was rising beyond what we can manage as a country. So that even by the time we were going to Eurobond 2, we in ODM vehemently spoke against it, yes, even on this show. I still maintain that the government, this government, and the previous regime have put us at a level of debt that we should not have gone to. It is far too high. And what's worse is that apart from over-borrowing, there's also the question of misuse of the monies that are borrowed. There's the question of value for money. Whether that money that was borrowed has been put to optimal use. And in almost each of those cases, you find that there are questions. As we speak now, the audit queries on Eurobond 1 are yet to be answered.
Yes.
I think sometimes we forget that to date, there has been no audited report on Eurobond 1 before you come to Eurobond 2. If you look at the SGR that Dr. Halwale has spoken to, there are so many issues about it. There are so many issues around the question of the cost. If you compare the cost of what they did in Ethiopia and in other countries, you find ours is way beyond. And it does not help that even beyond that traditional cost, there are additional costs that keep rising. As the railway line keeps coming, then you have the National Land Commission buying land in exorbitant prices, yes, imaginary government land, and so the cost just keeps going higher and higher. It is unfortunate that at all material time when we kept raising these matters, the bodies that should have helped us speak on this, the Bretton Woods institutions, instead of speaking to it, were encouraging government, and they kept saying that we could still sustain more debt. I think it's only Moody's that spoke against it. But suddenly, after we've really stretched, then they wake up, the World Bank, I think the IMF, then they say, now your debt levels are too high. And as it was being raised, they didn't speak against it. And I think it is quite unfortunate. The solution that is supposed is taxation, with the result that Kenyans are, I think, one of the heaviest taxed individuals in the world. Overtaxation of persons who are already overstretched cannot be a solution to overborrowing, in my view. And in that respect, I agree with Senator Cheruiyot. When it comes to this thing of bank caps, and it's going to come back to Parliament soon, tomorrow actually, I am one of those who will oppose it. And I will oppose it because for the longest time I practiced as an advocate. Banks in this country had been raking and have been raking immoral amounts of money from persons who have borrowed. And you will find a situation where one has borrowed 2 million, interest alone is 10 million. So your property that is valued at 8 million is being sold at 4 million because you had borrowed 2 million. It's immoral. And therefore, when parliamentarians before my time decided that the solution was to put a cap, I think it is reasonable. The argument being made now that no, it's not helping the economy and all, they should have been able to control those immoral interest rates when they had the opportunity. But you cannot not come and say, we promise that this time we will make them reasonable, when previously you didn't. So I stand, and I'm one of those who will oppose it. We must maintain those caps.
All right, we must maintain those caps on the interest rate, the repealing that, of course, is one of the options that is on the table as well. Let's hear from Senator Matangi, briefly.
Yes, Debarl, in the autobiography of Lee Kuan Yew, he recites in memory a visit he made to Sri Lanka when it was called Ceylon. And in his visit, he says that he took a trip from the airport, was invited to their equal of State House, was given a bowl of soup to take. On his way to his hotel, he was waving at people, by the roadside, children and women. And by the time he arrived at the guest house, he knew the kind of economy he was talking about, or he was looking at, and he knew the kind of country that he was about to get into. And what I would want to say is that if you want to know and find out what kind of economy is a country in at that time, you don't need to go to the central bank. You just need to look at the lives of the people. And if you get the indicators from just the face of what you see from the citizens, then that tells you whether you are looking at an economy that is upward, that is stagnant, or that's on a downturn. And so, Debarl, a few things I may want to say quickly though. One is that yes, from the figures quoted here, it's true that the government has borrowed and borrowed quite a lot. The one thing that would be of curiosity would be the domestic borrowing quotient of the entire borrowing, because one, the domestic borrowing is really what will then be a kickstart to most of the negative factors that will affect the local people. And just when on that, one would be asking themselves two questions. First is, all this money that has been borrowed, where is it going? And in reference to the first statement that I made, you'd be asking, is it helping entirely in reducing the gap between those who have and those who don't have? And my answer would be that we are not yet there. Because if you ask me, where precisely would we be saying that we have applied a lot of our funds to make sure that we are reaping the benefits at the base level, for that matter. Not in seeing how many how many spiral highways we have, but of course I'm not saying that the focus on investment in infrastructure is misplaced. Actually, it is one of the main ones. But if you look at, for example, and this is my view, if you look at, for example, the push we have applied in ensuring, for example, that the cost of energy in this country, which is consumed by almost all of us as citizens and determines almost the price of everything. And I'm saying energy holistically because it is already reported in the press that we're expecting a rise in fuel prices very, very soon. And so one would be asking themselves, is our gun trained on the bull's eye? What would cause significant change wholly across the nation? And I believe, in my view, that we need to apply a lot much more focus. But we also must agree that there has been a few issues that have stood in our way. One, this fight against corruption, Debarl. Whether we say it or we don't say it, corruption is one of the big things issues that we have to look at, because no matter how much we apply our funds to any other area, as long as corruption still remains, that we borrow 300 billion and a quarter of it is pilfered, and it has to be repaid back with interest, I believe that we have to do more. Lastly,
thank you.
Let me just make one final comment on the question of interest rates, because Debarl, last week banks were announcing the profits they have made, and the profits they announced last week were in spite of the bill that we have, and if the interest rates, and if you listened to or saw the kind of profits that they spoke about very big profits, actually equal to what they made before this law was in place. So what you'd be asking yourself is, where are they making the money now that this law is in place? And the answer is very simple, that they tilted their borrowing clients from the local masses to government and to big borrowers. And does that help the economy?
Right. We should be winding up. Let's start with our
I think two things. I support the parliamentarians completely, both the Senate and the National Assembly.
And Mr. Kagwe, this serves also as your closing remarks.
Absolutely.
Right, please.
On the issue of maintaining the cap in this, because Debarl, what we must have as a government holistically is we must work backwards to produce pro-poor policies. This is essentially a poor country. So my closing remark is, whatever decision we are going to make, adding fuel taxes, that is not a pro-poor policy, because it is going to add, it is going to increase prices of food, etc., because of inflation. A pro-poor policy would have looked at all these massive cars that we have, Bonnie has and these guys have, and tax them seriously and save the fuel taxation, so that food does not become expensive.
Thank you.
It's let us adopt poor policies.
Thank you. Edward Chiriot, your closing remarks.
I liken the minds in our treasury to a man chewing gum, and when they get to a staircase, they stop chewing, scale up the staircase, only to continue chewing after finishing. What I'm saying is that there is absolute lack of creativity in how we run the treasury of the Republic of Kenya. For example, Debarl, I want to question and wonder, help me unravel this ministry. Why doesn't it bother them that you are building SGR all the way from Mombasa, say, to Kisumu, that shall be transporting goods that have been made in other countries just like Kenya, and doing absolutely nothing to ensure that as this railway turns in Kisumu to return to Mombasa, it is going back with goods that have been produced locally?
Yes.
There are no policies to push, that kind of innovation, and therefore it is, I think time has come for us to change the minds as treasury and replace them with more progressive and creative minds that are pro-poor, to borrow the words of Senator Kagwe, and understand the kind of economy that you are working
Dr. Otiende.
My closing remarks is, I think every day for the last 2 weeks, when we open the papers, there's always something about corruption, whether it's in the Senate, in the National Assembly, outside there, or some improprieties like riparian lands, road reserves and all that. And yet every day, side by side, we see people politicking at the lowest level, whether it's the ward, at the constituency, at the county, those who want to be governors at the national level, going around and still giving money and all that. And we as citizens, we decry the death of integrity and the corruption and the non-inclusivity on the one hand, and yet we celebrate the giving of money and all the others on the other side. I think I want to challenge us all as Kenyans, that from the lowest level, which is the ward, to the highest level, which is the nation, can we then start practicing what we are preaching? If we want integrity in office, if we want inclusivity, can we start by focusing on that, so that then we get leaders who will practice that, rather than get leaders who, after we elect, then we start attacking them for doing the opposite.
Thank you. Omatangi, briefly.
Well, I thought that I would have had an opportunity to get to the story you ran on page 6, which is about, that plot that senators sought 100 million shillings bribe, and I thought so. I had wanted us to get there because that's a committee in which I sit in.
Okay.
And unfortunately we didn't have time to go into this. But let it be my closing remark that You know, it's very sad, Debarl, and I want to put it on record that for the committee which I sit in, for us to have arrived at the conclusions that we arrived at and made that report, it was not an easy journey. We have, I sit in that committee, and we have had to face not only intimidation, actually we faced threats, serious threats from several quarters. Even as the chairman said yesterday, even threats on our lives. And I want to be on record as one day myself, when I questioned one of the senior people in government and walking from parliament, somebody followed me as I was going to a hotel and told me, don't you think it is time now for you to take care and watch over your life? And so I want to make it clear that this kind of diversion, that this kind of lies, and remember the song Colleagues recently, if anybody had this kind of evidence, it would have been out there in the public. So if it is, let it be brought. But the last thing that we are going to do is to allow anyone, no matter who they are or whatever position they hold, to try and intimidate us or use this kind of means. All right, finally, Dr. Kalole, finally, and closing remarks.
Thank you.
Briefly.
With all our factories functioning in Kakamega County, Mumias Sugar Company, Butali Sugar Company, and West Kenya Sugar Company, we produce 80% of all the sugar used in this country and in the region. I'm shocked that on page 26 of the Standard, Francis Atwoli is calling for the closure of Butali and West Kenya Sugar Company, together with the thinking with the block of governors who come from that area, that because of the challenge of poaching of cane, some animal code zoning should be introduced. I want to assure farmers at home that we are pushing, and we spent the whole of yesterday doing that with the respective line ministries to ensure that poaching must be controlled, not by using our factories as an excuse.
Thank you.
The only factories that are able to produce today are the ones they want to close so that brokers can bring in more sugar to mess our farmers even more. We oppose.
Thank you. Thank you. Our panelists, I want to thank you so much. I know there was a lot to cover, but nonetheless, because of really stuff for time, I thank you for your input this morning and coming also on a holiday to actually share with Kenyans on where we stand as far as politics is concerned, and of course issues that really touch them as well. That will be also the Kenya indebtedness and the skyrocketing prices of items as well. But as we're closing, we will be remiss if we don't also show you this particular cartoon that Gado has drawn today, just in remembrance of Kofi Annan, 1938-2018, the Secretary General, the former UN Secretary General, who passed on over the weekend. Our condolences from our panelists this morning. Of course, we shall also be discussing this on Standing on Guard tomorrow with our panelists. Don't go away. Also, we have Living With Us, which is coming up next. Thank you.